So far we managed to authenticate our users and get the Firebase user object back from the methods we used. So now let's see how can we implement this in our application. If you go to the Firebase documentation under web, authentication for web, and manage users, here we get this on-off state change. This is our observable that will listen for user change in case he sign in or sign out, so we can do something about it. But in our app, we're gonna use a library called RxFire, which is kind of new. They're still in beta, but was built by Firebase team themselves. So, and what it does is just make it creating and combining observables much more easier than using the plain SDK. So let's install it first. We're gonna use RxFire. We already have Firebase and RxJS. So back in our code, just gonna stop the server here, and I'm gonna npm install RxJS and RxFire. Now, if you scroll down all the way to the bottom, here there are some examples, but if you want the full documentation, here you can have for each module. So let's take a look at the authentication. Here we have this auth state that will emit either the user or a null value. So basically what it does is just do the same as this one, but here we need to do this code, either return the user or return null. And for the RxFire, we can just use one line code and add that to our application. So now that this is installed, we need to import the auth state from RxFire auth. We're gonna do that in the auth service. So first we need the auth state. We're also gonna need the observable from RxJS. And here we're gonna initialize a variable with the result from that function. Now to initialize, we can do that in a constructor. So here we just need to call this.user equals auth state. And the auth state takes the auth module from Firebase, this one here. So we just need to pass that inside. Take a look at the documentation. Here they are initializing the app and saving it in the auth variable and passing it to it. Then you can subscribe and get the data. It's the same as we did over there. So now let's go back to our code. Here, now we have this. So now we can subscribe to this user data anywhere in our app. It just makes sense to subscribe to it from the top level component, so we can pass it down to your children component. So let's do that in the app.tsx. And here, just on the component we load, we can add that function. But before, let's also create a variable to hold that. So user, Firebase user. Now we can import the authentication service. We have it in here. Now we have already imported the auth service, and then we can use it. Auth service.user. Now we can subscribe to it. When you subscribe to data, we open a stream and keep listening for any change that happened to that. So this.user equals data. So here we are initializing this variable with the data returned from the subscribe, which can be either the user object or null. So before we do this, let's console log that data. And let's run the server as well so we can check it out. Now here in our server we get the data, which is the same as this one with other stuff to it, like the Firebase SDK details and things like that. So now that we need to display it in the component itself. Now here's the thing. If you want Stencil to render the data from this user in the template, you need to mark it as an internal state. If you take a look at the documentation, you go on Components, Internal State. We need to use this state decorator before our properties, because this will tell when the template needs to be re-rendered in case of a change or even when the data is loaded. So now back to our application, we just need to add that decorator state, and it got imported in there from the Stencil core. Now here we are in the app.tsx, and we want to display the data. So we need to go to one of these components and display the data there. So for that, we can just use a route parameter. If you control click on the Ion route and go Ion route attributes, you can see we have a component, which you did. We have a URL, and we also have this components prop. And this is something we can use to send the data to that component. So back in here on now Ion route, I'm going to send to the home page, and we see how it works. So component prop, and remember we need to add the JSX interpolation here, but we need to pass an object, so we need double curly braces. So user, and you're going to pass this dot user from here. Now this user you can name however you like, but then you need to make sure that you add it to the component that is receiving as a prop. So let's go to the page home, and here we're gonna add another decorator called prop, and it's for the user. This I'm getting from the Firebase SDK, and is the type definition for the user that comes from Firebase. So we have all of this here. So whenever you want to take a look what the object can do or what are the properties, you can just control click on it, and it should open the type definition. So now here you can just display the data. Let's remove this one so we can create an array. And here I'm gonna add an Ion content, and inside just a h1 with the user data. So this.user.display name, and let's display something else. This.user.email. The server is running. Back in our application, if you reload the page, we have the email, but we do not have display name because it's not set for this user. And we also getting this error that we cannot get the display name because there isn't any. So when you're dealing with data, you should always try to do a fallback in case there is nothing there. If you're coming from a JavaScript framework like Angular, you'd have the ngIf to check if there is a user first. But for us, we're dealing with vanilla JavaScript and JSX, so we need to do it ourselves. So here we can do this.user if there is a user, and we can use a ternary operator from JavaScript. We display the name. If not, we just do nothing. And here for the ternary, if you do undefined, it's just not gonna run this block of code. So now if you reload, we get the same for the email, but we are displaying the email here. And that's because if you reload, the component's gonna render before the data is available. So you should also always keep a fallback in case there is no data, or your component will load before the data is available. So here's the same, this.user or undefined. So now if you reload again, all the errors are gone and we get our data when it's done. Now, Ionic just came out with a new component very recently, and it's the skeleton. If you go to components and if you scroll down the way to progress indicators, you can see Ion skeleton text. And this is what I'm gonna show. It's gonna display something while it's loading. So we can use this as a replacement for the undefined. So if you go in here and we change that undefined to the skeleton, so now if you reload the page, you can see that we get our flashes over there. You can customize it with, there's a width property that you can set. We can set the background. So, but this is just a little tool that we can use it just to tell the user that there is something coming and that the app is not broken. So now that we can access this user, let's learn how we can log out, and we're also gonna pass the data somewhere else on the user dashboard in here. Let's play around with this more. So in the next lesson, we're gonna log out, and we're gonna add some more user data to this page.